my father would stockpile them, and he would phone Moishe every day. Moishe, how much is copper today? And why he didn't phone International Iron, that's another matter. I'm saying that for your benefit.
I know you are.
But that's the way it was an ongoing thing.
Really.
All right, Billy.
So
I'm recording.
I just knew him from the shul every now and then, but he wasn't what some people would call a regular. He didn't come to shul.
To services? No, because Saturday was a big day for him, and he didn't come. But he came. Sundays was a big day for Moshe to come to shul. Yeah.
You know, I remember not only Sundays in the shul, but I remember the good old days when people would smoke. Now, one of the people whose company I really came to enjoy was your brother.
Brother Nate.
Nate. Craven A. I think Craven A or DeMaurier.
Probably DeMaurier near the end.
Every morning, and yeah, I got to know him a little a bunch of years ago. Is this thing working?
Yeah, I'm
okay, I didn't know.
I told you that, but you weren't listening.
What I just would ask you to do, Jack, is help us to figure out what York Street looked like and who was there, and you know what kinds of stores were there, whether it was like the center of town, whether people congregated there, was it where the action was? Just help us to figure that out.
For the Jewish population, York Street was the place to be. There was no other place. Throngs of people there on Saturday night, and many places weren't closed for Shabbos. Even Bolslawski's wasn't closed, but the father would stand outside and greet people, but he never worked behind the counter. So money, I guess, was important. But around us, there was Hamilton Auto Parts, and across the road was Gordon Auto Parts, and across the road from Gordon was Murray Auto Parts, and Fisher's Hotel was on the left side of Hamilton Auto Parts. And of course the three auto parts stores all did business with each other. Very funny story about it all is one day we would have a customer come in and he was looking for a specific item and we didn't have it, so the thing to do there was run across and buy it from Murray's and then still make the sale. You know, you don't send them to Murray's, you pick it up and you sell it to him. So it worked out most of the time that he'd already been to one, and you know, we were wasting each other's time because neither one of us probably had it, but they did the same. They would come over and pick up a given item. We ate lots of lunches at Bolslawski's, which was across the road. He was a very difficult person, the father, as opposed to Lefty, who was very low keel. And the father, I remember walking into his father when I first started to work at Hamilton Auto Parts, and his greeting was, "Nee, was willst du?" But he got ill in his later years, and he really, really mellowed. So then we became buddies, but he was a real tough person. Mother, she was okay. He ended up making the biggest sandwiches. Mother stinted a little bit. What else can I tell you there? Gordon Auto Parts was really not a competitor. because he was into the accessory business. He was into the curb alarms on cars. You know, they used to have an alarm that you'd put on your car, and if you were getting close to the curb, it would make a noise. Just a very, very cheap accessory, and he played around with that kind of stuff. Nice fella. Nice fella.
Was there just one deli, or were there?
No, there was more than one deli. There was, across the road from us was Boslowski's, or commonly called Bowles. Up the street there was Mrs. Platt's Delicatessen. Little further up was, across the road was Waxman, and they had a brother-in-law, I'm forgetting the name, just further up the street. Who was the fellow that was, now I'm asking you, that moved into where the train station is years ago? He was a branch off from there.
Oh, Lax.
No, not Lax.
Saks.
Saks. Saks. That's right. He was a partner with a brother-in-law, Cohen. His name was Cohen. Can't remember his first name. And there was Scott's Deli, which was further up the street. And they were near Gelber's, who was a butcher who got in trouble with the Vada Kashrut and was deemed not to be kosher, so there was a big fight amongst the butchers in town. There were 3 butchers, and my mother operated on the premise that this week is your turn, and the next week each one had a turn. You know, she couldn't buy from just one. You know, it's a small Jewish population. You couldn't cut one out. So she bought from each one. Each one had their turn. That was when Solly was in business with, I just looked at a Ned in the book there, and his former partner died. But Solly owned the business. Then there was another butcher east of Hamilton, a lot of parts, and it was two brother-in-laws, I think, Abe Golden and Hamburger. They also had a butcher shop. And then sandwiched between them was Wright's Fruit. Hamilton Auto Parts was right next door to Hamilton Auto Parts was Pearlgut's. It was a paint and wallpaper store. And then we had built a hardware store with offices upstairs that my brother Henry was in, and the rabbi used that for office space when we were building the shul. That was the office space at the time. And how come there was a little wallpaper shop in between? My mother insisted that we never ever turn them away, you know. They got a little business, they got to make a living, leave them alone. So they were never pushed out to make one big building out of it. Another reason for that is because she had, her son had something to do with movies, and I think Mrs. Pearlgut took my mother to the movies on a regular basis, on the house.
Jack, do you remember the JCC on
Delaware? On Delaware Avenue, of course. at the time of the JCC on Delaware. We played basketball, volleyball. They had a steam bath. Rotman was in charge. First name?
Max.
Maxie.
But are you of the age, do you remember the JCC before Delaware?
Yes, I remember the JCC on John Street, of course.
Talk about that one.
Talk about JCC on John Street. Well, at that time, I was probably a teenager. We frequented it. We had dances there. There was quite a lot of activity there. We had dances. At that time, I think B'nai B'rith division of for the younger set was AZA. Was that what it was? And we had meetings down there, and we were kept pretty busy. That was a good place to go to.
Was the Tomatora also in that building, or can you just describe that whole area?
The Tomatora must have been in the same building. And it's still a community center of some sorts that belongs to whoever, Portuguese or whoever might be there, but it was one big building. They had dances there. I don't think there was a gymnasium in there.
Can we just go back to York Street for a minute? You were talking about these auto parts stores.
Yes.
When I think of York Street, I think of like a commercial district with stores. Like, was it all on top of each other? The industrial plus the commercial stuff? Were people just walking up and down the street? Can you just sort of describe the whole street feel?
There was the automotive center of Hamilton. Unlike today, which the mountain is, or the east end of Hamilton, there was. Well, you want me to name all the. You don't want me to name all the auto parts stores, but there was 5 or 6. There were 5 or 6, and Fisher's Hotel was a fixture. I remember. My bar mitzvah party was in Fisher's Hotel. Also along the streets there was fish market. There were all the grocery stores. Howard Rosenberg's mother and father. They had nicknames for a lot of the Jews along York Street, and some of them were not very complimentary, so we won't go into them, but they referred to them as whatever. Not always complimentary, as I said. There were Mr. and Mrs. Yaffe had a grocery store, and it was right across the road from the Rosenbergs.
Was York Street like a hangout? Like, when would the kids, would the parents, like, who would hang out there? When would they hang out there? What would they do?
Well, I know that on a Saturday, and on Saturdays, like after services, I recall going down there on Saturday, and they would play cards. I would go down there and eat a meal. There was everything. It was a going concern. Myself, as a youngster, I would go down every day to the shop. And after school, I'd walk there. It wasn't that far. And see what was going on. In many ways, probably that's where I learned the business backwards, by looking over the older employees' shoulders. And they played pinochle, they played poker, they played cards. The shuls were nearby. Saturday nights in the shul, shalashodas, they had these big barrels of beer. I can honestly tell you that going there, being taken there by my parents and giving a taste of beer that to me was so bitter, I've never drank it again in my life. Seriously, that turned me right off. Never tried it again. But yeah, it was busy. And people had to choose where to shop. There was a lot of competitors, different people in the same line of business, as I said. Mrs. Vine, who was a cousin, was a cousin to our family, a niece to my father, opened up a restaurant there, and she got lots of action. It wasn't elegant or anything like that, but she damn well cooked a good meal. And she got people coming there for lunches that worked in the area. I'm sure people like the Hoffmans and Cams, who also had an automotive store where the shul used to be, where Horton's now is. Everybody ran over there. And across the road from Hamilton Auto Supply, which was Cam and Hoffman, as I just said, Hoffman's brother, Solly, had a scrapyard. So there again, a competitor with Morris Lax. And they just lined up on the street to sell their wares. The wagon people literally lined up in the streets. And I think I'm not sure, I think he kept Shabbos, and he had to get everything finished before sundown.
Sounds like a great place.
Just a minute. The wagon people lined up on the street, on York Street, to sell their...
Not York Street, this was on Bay and Cannon. But that's close enough to York Street,
And they were lining up to sell or to buy?
To sell.
To whom?
To Saul Hoffman.
These are the peddlers with their horses?
These were the peddlers with their horse and wagon. Unless they, years went on, maybe they had an old truck. Eventually became that. And
if there were so many of these little peddlers,
tons of them.
how did they compete with each other? How were they all able to make a living?
How were they all be able? They had different places to pick it up. Today, as a matter of fact, which always amazes me, they go around to garages today. I don't know if this is what you're interested in, but they go around to garages today, and they're literally taking the stuff for nothing. And what they do with it, the garages don't care, because they want it out of their way. Like scrap batteries and all that, nobody wants them, but they still have some value, so they come and pick them up today and still take them to shops like wherever, and to Posner perhaps, which is in the other end of the city. And they sell the stuff.
But in those days,
they got money for it. They made a living on it. Where they got it, they'd go all over, any place to get it.
and then they'd sell it to...
To the scrap dealers.